Hello there, my name is Isabel McFadden. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about some of the important key witnesses in the McCann case and the fact that they're actually not even Portuguese. Now, this week, not this week, but this month, we had the McCanns in court in Lisbon with Mr. Gonçalo Amaral and for damages regarding a book that he wrote. Now, this book that he wrote was from official police files who had actually already been released in the media. So, a little bit odd that, I mean, I think a case like this in the United States would never even make it to court because you were actually using public record. But even in court, Mr. and Mrs. McCann could not agree on certain questions, which I thought, oh my God, this case is dead in the water. One of the questions that they couldn't agree on was if the Facebook pages that they're talking about that were in a frenzy after the book came out existed before the book. And Mrs. McCann said that indeed she believed they existed, but Mr. McCann said, I'm not quite sure. Well, that is odd. That is the exact premise for your case, that people on Facebook were talking about you because of this book, and they started all these Facebook pages. Well, the Facebook pages were already there. People are already talking. Now, the other key thing is the fact that the book was never translated into English or published. So we're talking about Facebook pages with strictly English-speaking people, and mostly, I would say, not Portuguese names. I've met very few Portuguese people on there. About a book that was never translated into English. It had nothing to do, people knew about Mr. Amaral just because he had been demonized by the McCanns in the media, and people were not feeling too warm and fuzzy towards the McCanns, so people got curious and they started reading. And of course, once the police files were released, people were curious and they started to read about the book. They started to, having friends translate it and stuff like that, but it was never published in English. So, and they obviously were also reading the files, the police files that were public to everybody. So it's very interesting, that they are suing Mr. Amaral for $1.2 million, but they can't agree on the simple Facebook pages fact. Now getting on to the witnesses that I wanted to talk to you about. There are three very important ones. I don't think I'll have time to get into the dogs, which is the fourth, but they are not people, but some people think dogs are people. But the first one I'm going to talk to you guys is Yvonne Martin. Yvonne Martin is a British woman. She's a social worker with credentials in Praia da Luz at the time of the disappearance. Yvonne got up that morning, the first morning, and decided that she would visit the McCanns for support. When she arrived at the McCann's apartment, she saw Mrs. McCann, and she went right to her. She showed her credentials. She said, I'm a British social worker. I'm here to help you. Anything I can do for you. She did speak to Mrs. McCann for a little bit, but she was pushed away. She didn't feel very welcomed by their friend, Mr. David Payne, Dr. Payne. And she thought, what an odd thing. I'm here to help, and I'm not feeling very welcomed. Mrs. McCann at the time did tell her that she saw a couple, and she believed that they could have taken Madeleine, and that's in the police statement. Now, the reason why there's a police statement about this is because Mrs. Martin was so uncomfortable with what happened there at the apartment that she went to the police and told them and said, I am a social worker. Here are my credentials. I came to help, and I pushed away, and I feel that there's something very weird. And I remember that doctor from a previous case I worked on in England. And that is in the files. So please go and Google the McCann Files, PJ Files, and Google Yvonne Martin, and it will go right to it, and you'll be able to see her statement. The second one I would like to talk to you about is the Smith sighting. The Smiths, also not Portuguese, they were an Irish family on holiday, leaving a bar, Kelly's Bar, with a receipt that clocked out at 9:39. The sighting was at about a little before 10 o'clock, and they describe a man who later on an e-fit was made and hid by the McCanns for 5 years. They described the man that later on, after they did 2 statements. The first statement was much earlier. It was a week or so, or maybe 2 weeks after the disappearance. The other one was in September, when they saw Mr. McCann after they had ran away from Portugal, coming off the plane holding one of the twins, and Mr. Martin couldn't believe it. He knew it. He goes, that's the man. That's the man I saw in Praia da Luz. And he immediately called the police and he made a report. So you